Connecticut is a lush suburban enclave in the center of the urban Northeast. And in spite of its proximity to large cities, there's clean air, beautiful woodlands, and wide open spaces. And it's not just people who enjoy Connecticut's green spaces. There's wildlife here, too. Countless wild animals call this state home. From large mammals to tiny ones, reptiles, insects, and birds of all kinds live here. But the woods are being cut down and they won't be coming back. Open spaces shrink by tens of thousands of acres each year as woodlands are replaced by suburban sprawl. And this has consequences for the wild residents. Every year, millions of native wild animals are injured or killed as a matter of course. Cars on roadways cause millions of injuries and deaths. Baby animals are orphaned when the trees they use as dens are cut down to accommodate subdivisions and strip malls. Animal families that seek refuge in chimneys or attics are often trapped or poisoned. There's one group trying to undo some of the damage. Wildlife in Crisis is a nonprofit organization that takes in orphaned, ill, and injured wildlife, rehabilitates them, and releases them back into the wild. They are also actively involved in land conservation and environmental education. Located in Weston, Connecticut, Wildlife in Crisis operates the only dedicated wildlife clinic in the region, including a nursery equipped with incubators that can accommodate dozens of baby animals, outdoor enclosures that house large mammals, and spacious flight cages designed for adult birds of prey.
The majority of calls that we get, of course, are in regard to common species, often referred to as nuisance species. That includes raccoons and possums and starlings and sparrows. Those are the calls that we're getting in the greatest numbers, of course, and we feel it's a humane issue that these animals are in need of care, so we're going to provide that care to them, in addition to the more glamorous species like eagles and some of the less common warblers and other small birds, and they all get the same degree of care here, both the popular and the not so popular animals.
A resident staff made up of interns and volunteers care for newborn and critically injured animals 24 hours a day. The workdays can be long and difficult.
We take in over 5,000 animals each year. The majority of those animals come in between the months of May and September, so we're mostly dealing with baby animals that we're releasing back into the wild at the end of the summer. But we take everything from tiny little field mice all the way to bald eagles and white-tailed deer. And we take in thousands and thousands of orphaned songbirds every year.
The dedicated staff, often working 16-hour days, rehabilitate countless songbirds, owls, raccoons, fawns, rabbits, flying squirrels, turtles, woodchucks, and foxes. And of the thousands of wild patients treated each year, fully 85% make it back into the wild. This young clutch of screech owls was found when the tree they were nesting in was cut down. Fortunately, they found themselves in good hands at Wildlife in Crisis. Injured and orphaned wild animals are delivered to Wildlife in Crisis by conservation officers, police, and vets. But most often, the injured and orphaned animals are brought by ordinary citizens who regularly arrive at the center with baby animals nestled in shoeboxes or wrapped in towels. No animal is turned away, because Wildlife in Crisis is the only facility in the region that accepts all species of native wildlife.
I called a little earlier about the birds. Yeah. We cut a tree down on the side of our yard.
Many of the calls during the spring and summer months pertain to wild animals that have given birth in attics, basements, chimneys, and drain pipes.
The parents never came back.
Okay. Yeah, they were probably just spooked and flew off. And just remember that springtime is the worst time to be cutting down trees because of all the nests and mating and nesting season. So for the birds, you can wait till October. Ideally would be when they cut down trees. We'll go on.
The staff emphasizes the importance of prevention over removal or extermination, because when an animal is removed, it often simply opens a niche for another animal to fill.
Yeah, we really hope.
Since you've seen it there for the last couple of days,
The trained staff of Wildlife in Crisis has handled countless so-called nuisance wildlife calls over the years, helping homeowners to save thousands of dollars with common-sense solutions to wildlife problems. Numerous calls in the spring involve mother animals that have been hit by cars, leaving their babies helpless by the roadside. Unusual or uncommon species turn up frequently. This baby mink was found in a local backyard. She stayed at Wildlife in Crisis through the winter and was released this spring with the hope of finding a mate and having a family of her own someday. Wildlife in Crisis was the first Connecticut facility in decades to raise and release a bald eagle. The yearling eagle, suffering from a wing injury, spent a year in residence at Wildlife in Crisis and was successfully released. This barred owl, brought to Wildlife in Crisis last spring, was released a year later, healthy, strong, and able to rejoin her kind in the wild. This kind of commitment takes a lot of time and money. A handful of unpaid, full-time employees and volunteers have a hard time keeping up. Wildlife in Crisis has a tremendous need for your financial assistance. It costs between $50 and $1,000 to keep each animal fed and housed with proper medical care during their stay. And this doesn't begin to cover the broader programs, including educating the public and open space preservation through the Wildlife Land Trust.
Our programs cost about $300,000 a year to run. These animals are very expensive to feed and house, and we always are in need of, making repairs on cages and to our facility. So we're always in need of donations. Our primary purpose at Wildlife in Crisis is to release these animals back into the wild, give them a second chance at life in the wild. We worry about them, of course, but we know they're where they're meant to be, free again.
This is what we love about living here. Our quality of life is enhanced when we live harmoniously with the wonderful creatures with whom we share our backyards. Please help with your contribution and become part of the solution that saves wildlife and wild places for future generations.